Well, joining us live now is the Agriculture Minister, Murray Watt. Murray, good to see you. Thanks for your time. Let's start off with the Prime Minister and pretty positive news, you got to say, that he's greenlit this trip to China later on this year. But what's the quid pro quo here? What will we get in return for the Prime Minister's visit?
Cool. Good morning, Pete. Well, obviously it is good news on a range of fronts that the Prime Minister will be visiting China later this year, and that will coincide with the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations and Gough Whitlam's visit to China as the then Prime Minister. We don't undertake these sort of visits on a transactional basis, quid pro quo, but obviously we would be hopeful that as a result of the Prime Minister's meetings that there would be continued progress on those trade impediments that China still has in place for agricultural products. You'd be aware that we've had some good news over the last few weeks around barley tariffs, and prior to that, things like cotton, horticulture. But there are still some important impediments that we want to see removed, and all of this dialogue, I think, is useful in getting them removed.
Yeah, I mean, surely trade resumes unimpeded, though. That's got to be a consequence out of this, doesn't it?
I wouldn't say that it would be an automatic consequence, but certainly the opportunity for the Prime Minister to be meeting his counterparts at the most senior level of the Chinese government has got to be a good thing in terms of removing those remaining trade impediments, whether it be wine, lobster, some beef establishments. There's still more work to be done, and the more we can be taking up that dialogue, the better.
All right, well, let's zero in on wine and lobster. When would you expect a decision to be made on that?
Again, I wouldn't be able to put a date on those, but I think, again, the positive moves that we've already seen for other products does increase the chances that China will remove the other impediments. We've, of course, got that World Trade Organization case going at the moment about wine, and we would be hopeful of a positive decision there, just as we got a draft decision from the WTO for barley. But we've always said that we think that these sort of issues are much better resolved through dialogue between the parties rather than through long-running, essentially, court cases. So, you know, again, I can't put a time frame around these things, but the sooner we can get this resolved, the better.
Okay. Qatar is the big story of the week here, as you would know. Now, 47 different reasons have been given for the blocking of extra Qatar flights to Australia without landing on a single one, though. Is your government making a dog's breakfast of batting this one away?
Well, I suppose I have to disagree with you there, Pete. I mean, really, from the day one, Minister King has given one reason and one reason only for her decision, which is the national interest. She said that there are a range of factors that... Well, it's about what is in the overall interest of Australia, and she has always said that there were a number of factors that went to the national interest. But again, as you've seen over the course of the week, we've made the point that she's not the first Transport Minister to make this kind of decision. Michael McCormack made exactly the same kind of decision when he was the Transport Minister by denying Qatar its request. So this is usual practice for ministers to sometimes agree to requests and sometimes not, and they'll always take into account what's in the overall national interest.
Right, but the Transport Minister, I mean, she seemed all at sea on this one, though, all week, saying the strip search wasn't the reason, then yesterday confirming that it was.
Well, I read her transcript yesterday, and what she said was that it was part of the context for her decision, and I would have thought that's pretty self-evident. But she has always said that there was no one factor that decided this outcome. And let's not forget that it's not as if Qatar is the only airline that's seeking to get into Australia. Even over the last few months, we've seen more flights come in from China Southern, from a number of other airlines, which is opening up that trade. And remember that Qatar already has the ability to be flying into a number of airports that they're not taking up. In my state here in Queensland, two of our major tourist destinations, the Gold Coast and Cairns, Qatar has the ability to be flying into those airports at the moment, and it's choosing not to. They could be bringing in bigger planes, allowing more passengers in Brisbane Airport, in Sydney, in Melbourne, and a number of others as well. So it's not as if they don't have options. It's just that they didn't get this particular option that they were seeking.
Okay. Back on the excuses, though, and you brought up human rights, and Catherine King referred to this yesterday. If human rights is the issue, as the opposition said yesterday, why have flights from Qatar at all?
Well, I guess you'd have to ask the opposition why they've all of a sudden switched position from the position they took in government when their own minister denied Qatar the flights that they were seeking. As I say, Minister King has made clear that there were a range of factors involved, that the incident, the very disturbing incident involving Australian women being strip searched, was part of the overall context for her decision. But really, the minister has made a decision on one matter alone, and that is the request for Qatar for extra flights rather than what they're already doing.
Okay, well, if that logic applies to that, then why wouldn't it apply to Air China with its well-documented human rights issues? Plus, we've got 2 Aussies in prison, so why should they be different?
Well, I'm not aware of whether Air China has got an application before the Transport Minister to increase their services. As I say, every application is treated on its merits. In this case, Catherine, as the Transport Minister, judged that it wasn't in the national interest for the Qatar's request to be approved. But that doesn't mean that we're not approving extra requests from airlines, other airlines, where they stack up. I have full confidence that she'll apply that sort of logic and the same approach to every request that she receives.
And another excuse being that it was to protect Qantas's profits. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that's an excuse that some people have put around, but I don't know that that's. Well, I don't know that there's any evidence for that being one of the decision-making points for Catherine King. As I say, she has said that there wasn't any one factor for her decision. She said there was a range of factors that she took into account, and her judgment was that in the end, it wasn't in the national interest to approve Qatar's request.
Okay, so we'll just close here. I mean, there's some discrepancy over what the Prime Minister might have known, and I suppose this is a question for him anyway. Are you satisfied that he didn't know about it?
Well, that's what he's told the Parliament, and I've got no reason to think anything different. I mean, what he has said is that he did speak to the CEO of Virgin on July the 13th, and Catherine has advised that he was aware of this decision before, or his office was aware of the decision before she made it public on the 18th of July. I don't think that those dates necessarily mean that there's some vast conspiracy here. So I absolutely back in what the Prime Minister's been saying.
Murray Watt, always good to chat. We'll talk to you again soon.